Okay, sounds good.
Okay, welcome to the show again, Mr. Jack Donovan. I appreciate you for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I It's kind of caught me off guard. You've got this keen interest in truth, this whole mentality. What's the process that kind of brought you to this point that you're at today? This kind of heathen mindset, if you will.
Well, for a long time, I kind of figured I'd end up there. I've never been, a lot of people are very anti-Christian,
Right.
and I was raised a little bit Catholic, but I think I'm probably going to write an essay at some point that just said Jesus is boring. I've never been. I've never been like, I'm so mad about Christianity. I was like, this is boring. I'm like, even as a kid, I had to go to catechism classes and so forth. And I got kicked out for putting my feet up on the desk because I was just being a little dick. And I'm just like, this is so boring. So whenever people start arguing even about Jesus, I'm just like, talk about something else. So I've always been going in this direction. And then, I was more of an atheist when I was younger. More of a strict atheist, like I think a lot of people are these days. But then you end up in a very oppositional mindset. And I briefly was in the Church of Satan for a little while. And people always think Satanism, but the Church of Satan is pretty much just atheism, for people who like horror movies, right?
Right.
And so I was in that for a little while, but that oppositional nature is very negative.
I agree.
And so I was looking for something that had a more positive direction to it.
You brought that negative connotations kind of come up twice. I see that as one of those ideas that distract us off the path of whatever course we might choose, to the left or to the right. I see a lot of people get distracted, and I was going to bring it up later, but it's come up now. When you in your latest book, A More Complete Beast.
Right.
Talk about the far right and the far left. The far right, it's an absolute shit show getting involved in that stuff because it pulls you off to the left or to the right. We get distracted by ideas that have nothing to do with moving us forward as an individual. Where'd you go? I mean, that's kind of when you first started out, and what was it? Was it The Sky Without Eagles that I believe you wrote first?
The Way of Men is the kind of my foundational book.
Okay. Yeah. When it started out in the first chapter, there was an association there that you've kind of drifted away from. And is this kind of a form of your development? Hopefully this is your growth? Because I know in my writings, the first thing that I wrote, I look at it now and I'm like, that's not exactly who I am anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the hard thing about being a writer. You put all your ideas down, and then you're kind of tied to them as an anchor, right? And so, I hate anonymous commenters on the internet for that reason. I mean, like, that must be very freeing, that I can just write whatever I want, however I feel that day, and it doesn't have to make sense. And every time I sit down to write, I think about, this has to make sense with everything else I ever wrote, and if I change my position, I have to explain why. And so I have a commitment to that. And so I think it's very important to think about all of that.
I do think about that when I'm writing, but there's also a part of me that's like, I should be doing better. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. You kind of started out for me. I mean, I just kind of come across you and you started saying these very radical things about being a man, being masculine. I mean, whatever else may be occurring, you're still a man. Be that man.
Yeah.
And it seems like you were literally thrust into the limelight almost overnight. I mean, you gained a lot of success. I think a large part of that has to do with a fairly brilliant mind with regards to marketing. What was the thought process that helped you nail that image down? Because I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that. They have great ideas, they have wonderful intentions, but they can't nail down that image of what they want to become. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, in many ways, as far as The Way of Men is concerned, I mean, a phrase that I've used a long time has been become a vessel for the message. And, who do they want to hear that message from? I mean, I can't be, when I started out writing about this kind of stuff, there weren't very many people writing about it at all. And it was kind of an open field, and I saw that there was a problem and I wanted to address it. But now it has snowballed, and then you have your Jocko Willinks and your guys that are out there who have all this real world experience that they can bring to the table. What I wrote about in The Way of Men is very much theory. And you have all these guys who actually have practice and they can bring it into the game. So, but I think that some of the theory that I wrote is very foundational. You know, and I also have to be me, right? You can't be inauthentic in the sense that you're not being someone who you want to be. I mean, I can't be Jocko Willink. I can't do that for them. I have to be a guy who went to art school. And so I can be masculine, but I also have to, you know, do things that interest me, because at the end of the day, you know, we're out here, we're doing this job of being a public figure or whatever.
Right.
But, at the same time, I mean, if I'm not doing something that I like to do, then that sucks. You know, you know, I mean,
you're absolutely right.
I have to have fun. I mean, this is why, you know, I do things that I'm like, well, if I just ran around with an AR-15 and went to gun classes, it would probably be a lot better for me financially.
Right.
You know, but, and I do a little bit of that, but I mean, I'm interested in, you know, weird pagan shit. So that I'm going to keep doing that.
I know what you mean.
You know, I mean, if I would just calm that down and was a little bit more straightforward about some stuff, then, you know, I wouldn't be pumping all my money into, you know, building Vodenash out of my land. You know, I could be doing other stuff.
That's a good idea. You know, when you first started writing, did you watch the interview on Joe Rogan with Chuck Palahniuk?
No, I didn't. I almost never watch stuff like that. But I've met Chuck a couple times, but I've never watched that.
Well, I watched it because I had a keen interest in this writer. I mean, he's talking about his writing club. So he was talking about when he first wrote Fight Club. He's like, there were no other books for kind of imagination. He said there was that, and there was Good Will Hunting.
Right.
And he said that's basically it. So it's kind of a surprise. I think that speaks volumes about the state of what it means to be a man in this world when that's your choices. Now, you're right. It has snowballed. Men are standing up and saying different things. Yeah. And I think we kind of agree on that. It's time to stand up for that. One of the things that made me want to reach out to you was a presentation you did on the Ouroboros. I saw it on YouTube and I thought it was brilliant, but there was something else that went with that. As a writer, and I'm sure you do the same thing, we see things all the time. It strikes an idea. I got to make a note about that. Yeah. So I was watching a deal on Netflix about these astronauts talking about Earth. One of the astronauts said that when he took his socks off, you could see all the skin cells fly off. He said, I am literally not the same individual I was 5 years ago. Yeah. All the bone cells, all that is sloughed off. And I saw that and it captured my imagination. And then I saw this snake eating itself, always reinventing itself, always becoming something better. When you talk about Thor slaying that serpent, this is the Midgard serpent, this is that representation, this is the warder of men. What's your take on this idea that it is the venom from that snake that kills Thor 9 steps later? There's a real powerful imagery there. How does that kind of tie together with where you're going now? We have this idea of constantly growing, constantly developing, but are we developing into what we're supposed to be developing? That's kind of the question I'm getting at.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a consciously directed process. And that's one of the things I was talking about in that speech. You know, you're driving that ship to a certain thing. You have to decide kind of how you want to evolve. But you do have to continue to evolve. And I see that as a very Odinic thing in terms of, you know, the Ouroboros and constantly consuming yourself, you know, sacrificing yourself to yourself over and over again. You're just this eternal process of becoming, you know, eating what you used to be and using it as fuel to become what you are going to become next. And we have to do that a lot in life anyway. You know, like I like talking to people right now because I'm, you know, at a certain age. And I see a lot of guys who they're going on to their second career. Yeah. Like I was on a podcast that hasn't come out yet, but I was on a podcast with Brandon Lilly recently, and you know, and also Mark Twight, and they're guys who Mark Twight was a famous mountain climber for many, many years. And then Brandon Lilly was a famous power lifter. And then you get to a point where you can't do that anymore. And so you have to find, well, what am I going to do next? And so you have to reinvent yourself. And I think that's a really interesting part of life, that you have to keep doing that anyway, because we used to die a lot earlier. So there's more life to live,
That was a common problem I've heard with astronauts and Olympic gold medalists. After they had achieved that pinnacle of success, then what do?
Yeah.
How do you top that? How do you become something better? And I don't think we've been given permission as men to change that goalpost. Say, we're going to go with this goal. There's another avenue. We might still be men and still pursue this new course and enjoy a different kind of success. I don't think our society clearly delineates these stages of masculinity that we move through. You know what I mean?
Oh, no. Yeah, absolutely. When you see it, everyone really does it. I mean, like NFL players become sportscasters. Yeah. There's this transition to another stage in life. And Jung wrote a lot about that, in middle age, things change in that way. But yeah, I mean, I think there is no path for that, but then you kind of have to find that yourself. Again, what do you want to do? Now that you've already done the thing that you set out to do, what do you want to do next? It's your life. So
it is. I think we're not given permission to do it. I mean, we're all, well, you got to do this and you got to do that. And it can be a problem for a lot of men that cannot make that healthy transition that you're kind of talking about in the course. That midlife crisis kills a lot of men. I've seen it happen many times, and it like to kill me. Let me tell you, it was a tussle.
Yeah, I had a rough year last year.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in your book, A More Complete Beast, you outline kind of what this state of existence that most men seem to languish in. You very clearly, they point out the failures or lack of success because we prefer to be comfortable just doing that one thing, right?
Right.
How do we frame that idea? Because there are 850 million other Caucasians for, this in pagan faith, and there's this pagan faith over here, and there's this heathen faith. How do we frame that idea so that when people on the outside start looking in, they see something worth gravitating towards? So I think the image that we present more often than not is not one that is conducive to that positive mindset, to a comfortable individual. You see what I'm saying? How do we... Yeah, if you would elaborate on that, man, that'd be great.
Well, there's a lot of teenage rebellion, in that kind of the culture, and there's a lot of the rebellious nature. We kind of talked about that a little bit,
right.
the oppositional nature, and that's a bad place to stay stuck forever. I mean, a lot of people go through that, but you have to find a positive direction. I mean, I've been talking a lot lately with a lot of guys about having a more solar perspective in terms of being a little less moved by other things and a little bit more of a bright light to those people around you, whether it be your family or whatever, than becoming this negative thing that's always dragging people down into a negative place. And I think in A More Complete Beast, I wrote a lot about that, Nietzsche and resentment, and the idea of always blaming other people for what's going on, and always complaining about especially in this community right now, as fragmented as it is, there are, so many people that they're always angry. The world is so terrible. Everything's going toward the end. We're in Ragnarok right now, like we're in Kali Yuga or whatever. And, by focusing on that all the time, it's a little bit vain, in the sense that, oh, really, your time is the worst time that's ever been had, like, on
a grand scale. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, there are dudes, spent their whole lives dying in a coal mine before, there's all kinds of bad times that have been had. So, things in the world seem a little bit messed up and upside down sometimes, but, it's our job to be positive. And I think you can't control how other people behave. I think that's a big mistake. You saw that with a lot of the New Age movements, whether it be Satanism or whether it be like Asatru, and that they wanted to control the definition of a thing at the beginning and say, this is what this is, and everyone who's identifies as this has to behave in the exact same way. And that isn't how these things work. You can't be Catholic about it. You can't be, I'm the Pope, and now everybody has to follow my rules, because these are very tribal ideas anyway. So I think that rather than trying to control all these whatever, like 850 million people or so, or how they react to this, you just have to lead by example. And that's it. Be the positive force in this, and then if they want to be in the negative area, they can go do that. But if you want to be the positive force, you need more people just being leaders in that direction.
That's true. I pointed out not long ago that whenever we do make this radical decision to change the spiritual foundation of our existence,
sure,
we all of a sudden become the poster boy to everyone in our immediate vicinity of what that success looks like.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there bitching about this, that, or the other, and maybe not so much, right? Maybe that's not what we need to be looking at. That's, and your book, A More Complete Beast, it's as much a mindset as a philosophy, I think, of physical conditioning. At least that's what I got out of it, the mind and the body.
Oh, absolutely.
What about the part of the champion?
Bouncing off of what you said there,
yes.
Being a good example is worth a lot. People in the masculinity industry that I contact, a lot of them are Mormons.
Yes.
And you can say whatever you want about Mormonism, but the Mormons have their shit together. And a lot of times, and not all of them, obviously, but the guys that I've come in contact with, okay, they don't drink. They have a house. They have like 4 or 5 kids. They have their family life seems pretty solid and it's pretty together. They seem like they have a purpose in life. They seem directed. If you're going to be the heathen guy or the pagan guy, the Asatru guy or whatever, you should be throwing that out.
I do.
This guy has his, that guy's a pagan or whatever, but he really has his shit together. Be that example.
It's funny you say the Mormons, because I've thought that my wife, my brother-in-law is the son of a famous Osmond, and there's like 5 of them, and they're brothers, and they used to sing. But I know those cousins. I know I've been in their homes and I've seen how they live, and they are solid as rock.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no deviation. There's no question. They say I love them to death. I honestly do. But if you look at these failings of these other major ancient religious institutions, we're witnessing the birth of another one right here in the United States. Mm-hmm. I mean, 100 years ago, you could kill one in Missouri legally.
Yeah.
They were run out of every legitimate community from Pennsylvania all the way across to Utah. And a couple of years ago, one ran for president. Some have said in the Supreme Court, they're congressmen. Wait a minute, their radical deviation from Orthodox Christianity is resulting in a positive and successful example of men and women have healthy families and stuff.
Yeah.
And here we are trying to recreate the wheel. Maybe we ought to be looking at that a little bit, huh?
Yeah, what are they doing right?
Exactly. They're doing something right. They're taking, what they do? They take care of each other. Yeah. I mean, without fail, you may not even be a Mormon. If you're living in that community and you're struggling, you can go see the bishop of that community, and he will make sure you have food to eat.
Yeah,
they will take care of you, man, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think we get tied up in our egos a little bit too much, and I think there's a certain amount of fear of what happens to me if I buy into that idea. What do I become if I let go of some of this anger and resentment and say, okay, well, it's all right if they believe that.
Right.
I think there's a lot of ego involved in that. I think that's one of the biggest lessons of Loki.
Yeah, and you can't control what everybody thinks of you. I mean, I try and I obviously have a public image, and I try to put out the right message all the time. But people are going to take away what they take away, and that's more about them than it is about you sometimes.
How do you handle that? Because I'm sure that you've taken. I mean, I've taken no small amount myself, but you've probably taken quite a bit more than that. I mean, just how do you handle that kind of negative sentiment being sent your direction because of whatever? What you're saying might be right, but no, he's not, he can't, who's he saying? He can't say that. How do you deal with that kind of negative influence? Because if you let it, it'll eat your lunch.
Oh yeah. I mean, every once in a while, to get me, I'm human, and I've seen people who are a lot bigger than I am. Just getting angry arguments on the internet because people who are multimillionaires with giant companies. Like, why are you doing this, dude? So it's not just, it makes me feel good that I see that because I'm like, they got them that day,
Right.
Like I always say, so if something gets me first thing in the morning, it's the first thing I see. Then I'm like, that kind of messes up my day, right?
Yeah.
But a little bit. I mean, I try not to let it for very long. But
I don't look at that stuff first thing.
I mean, I don't take. The thing is, you have to choose what criticism you value,
Right.
and that's what's really important. Is that you have to choose what criticism you value. Uh, I don't. I even had a guy the other day who I like, and he's a good guy, and he's had probably there's a lot to learn from him, but he was offering me a lot of criticism that I didn't ask for, and that we weren't on the same page. We weren't arguing about the same thing. Like, I will reach out to my friends who I respect and say, hey, what do you think about this idea? I'm working on this idea. What do you think about this? Do you see anything here? Do you see anything extra that I should add? And that's valuable to me because I respect them and we're coming from the same perspective. But, if you have someone who's just coming from a completely different perspective and they want to tear down what you're doing, it's like, well, we're not even going in the same direction here. So why you can't allow that to influence you that much, and also, like I said, anonymous people. There's so much of that you have to deal with, anonymous commenters and stuff. I'm sure this will be on YouTube, and YouTube's the worst. YouTube and Twitter.
Yeah, there'll be some shit said on this one, I promise.
Oh, absolutely. and it's like, who is this guy? Like so-and-so 357, who's afraid to name out in real life, but has very important things to say about me. I mean, they can screw that guy. I don't need that. And I just don't want to pay attention to it. When I put my stuff up on YouTube, I just put it no comments because I don't want to hear it. If I want to know what my friends think about me, then I'll ask them.
Right.
I don't need. This is a stranger. Like, that guy could be sitting in his basement covered in Cheeto dust, and why would I wouldn't listen to what he said if I was out in a restaurant. Why would I listen to it now?
I know you're right. And there's. I think we're conditioned for that. I think we're trained to buy into that. We watched our parents do it watching Walter Cronkite on the evening news. We're trained to buy into that. I think a lot of people honestly think they get confused, that righteous indignation for a spiritual experience, because so much of what we're dealing with, what we're learning, what we're trying to achieve is coming from a digital media, a social format. Yeah. And I think people legitimately get drawn off course by that feeling of righteous indignation. And like I said, they confuse it for that spiritual experience. There's a lot of energy in that. You get goosebumps and you're ready to go. And you work. I mean, hell, we do it when we work out.
Yeah.
But that brings me up to another thing. We talk about the philosophy, the mindset, and the physical conditioning. What about the heart of a champion? What's your thoughts on cultivating that heart of a champion, that guy that won't quit, that guy that loves something? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the heart and the mind are the same thing. So I mean, I think the mindset is. I mean, there's the spirit, I guess, that you could say in that way, But they're on your brain, really. So it's hard to separate. And yeah, that's just in terms of being persistent or whatever that you're kind of getting at. Yeah, I mean, you can cultivate that, certainly. You can cultivate that in your own life, and that's why it's helpful. A lot of people read books about famous men or books about men who have overcome things, and then that gives you more inspiration to do that yourself.
Yeah, that really does. I mean, I remember when I was a sergeant in the Army, We Were Soldiers once came out, and we all read it. Every NCO in the unit devoured that, and we were just all over that. But I think one of the things I wanted to ask you, there's a pattern among men that have been raised, a lot of them in single homes, of trying to get a woman to tell them they're man enough. And it's the damnedest thing. I mean, I don't know how many men I've talked to, they split up with their old lady. They feel like they were a fool written across their forehead. Mm-hmm. And, well, I guess I wasn't man enough to keep her, or I wasn't man enough, or she was with some other man. There's a real problem with men trying to get women to confer masculinity upon them. And it's the most alien thing imaginable as far as I'm concerned. What the fuck do they know about being a man?
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think it's a problem.
Oh, it's a huge problem. In fact, I think I'm actually going to open when I speak in Orlando. I'm going to open talking about that because I had a guy who left a comment. I was going to go, and this is about my opening speech. Is that I had this guy who left a comment on my Facebook page when I advertised that I was going to go speak at this men's conference, and he said, like, well, what you really need to do is impregnate a woman, and then you understand what a man is. And I was like, really? Like that doesn't really do it. I know a lot of messed up dudes who have managed to get that done, and that doesn't really. And then basically you're giving all your the control of your masculinity to this woman
who does not know what that means.
Yeah, and so it's just based on her approval. So it says like if she likes you today, then you're masculine, and if she doesn't, then all of a sudden you're nothing. And that's why masculinity, and that's what the way of men was really about. Masculinity comes from groups of men. It comes from your male peers, and proving yourself to them, not to a woman. Women, that's its own relationship. And the relationship you have with the woman. And what I like, and again, some of these Mormon guys that I've been, who have families and they have successful families, and Ryan Mickler, I've met that guy and been on his podcast, and I love that he says this because I'm not married and I don't have kids, but he is, and he's like, you have to know that you could be okay without her.
Yes, and that's exactly right.
And I'm like, to have a guy like that say that and be in a successful marriage is really powerful and important, because a lot of these guys think, and I think I'm going to write something about it, call it phrase error.
Yeah.
Because, for like, give away the thing that's important that you really need because you're so in love with this woman, and then you give up everything for her. And I know so many young guys do this all the time. They're like, well, I found the woman and she's the one. So now they throw their whole identity away. They throw everything that they said that they were up until that point to win this woman's love. And then she becomes everything that they are. And when she gets bored with them, then they're nothing because they threw everything away. I think you have to keep your own masculinity. That's a separate part. And that's what a lot of people have been saying, is that your masculinity, you're going to be a better man if that's a part of your soul that you take care of outside of that, because then you bring that power back into the relationship and you're a better man because of it. Not you're waiting for her to tell you that you're good enough.
It pisses me off you thought of that before I did. because I've always wrote, he's making that transition from the warrior to the father and the lover. I mean, there's a transition in masculinity there. It's a different role altogether. You can't be successful unless you've been one before that. So there's a pattern there. And I've always said, well, he passed on the next generation so he could be more of a father and a lover. But at the end of the day, he still loses his ass.
I mean, it's a good point. That's what myths are, right? They teach something like, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea, buddy.
Right.
Like this is something that men do. That's a reality that clearly, like, our ancestors have observed.
Yes.
That men do this, and they're like, well, if you do this, then remember that you're only going to have that antler at the end. So maybe balance that out a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. I am mad because you thought of that before I did. Damn it. I wrote, when I wrote, I was writing about some of Graham Hancock's ideas, and they're talking about the black mat. And I got this image because he was talking about continent-wide wildfires burning across North America. And I got this image of this farmer with an antler-handled implement fighting this fire to save everything he loves, and he still loses. But I don't know, it captured my imagination like few things have. Mm-hmm. But back to the business of Jack Donovan. Okay, so there's really no doubt the imagery you've decided on, you've been successful at it. I mean, you've broken ground literally in a lot of ways.
Thank you.
What's some of the inspiration behind that imagery that you have put out? I've seen some of the imagery, the marketing. It's consistent. It's maybe you got it from art school. I don't know, but it's been successful. As much as the message is successful, that image is what people are looking for.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's another one of these guys that I talk to a lot. I mean, he wrote a book called The Appearance of Power. His name's Tanner Guzzi, and he was saying things that I've said all my life in the book, and so I gave him a blurb for it, and because it was if you say you don't care about your appearance, you're still saying something.
Right.
You know, like you're still showing the world something. The way that you communicate the world visually, the way you appear, that tells them something about you. And so if you don't want to, you need to make sure that that message is consonant with the message that you're putting across through your words. And obviously I like creating imagery. That's why my platform is Instagram. That's something that I enjoy doing. I like using Adobe Lightroom, and I like creating powerful images, and I've always wanted to do that. And that's always been something that I've cared about. So that's something that I bring to the table. I think I bring a lot of aesthetic background.
Yeah, you do.
And I can kind of pull it all together, and that's one of my talents. You know, but I think that everybody does have to think about what they want to put out there. You know, because obviously, like, you know, in other groups that I've been part of and so forth, we always thought about it like, well, if you think that all heathens are just big fat guys who stand around in tunics and drink too much mead, then maybe you should not be one. You know, like, maybe you should, you know, focus more on fitness, or focus more on like, you know, if you want to put out this image that strength matters and that honor matters, and that you know, that you want to portray something that's positive, you have to visually represent that. And so I think that that's important. A lot of people miss that, and they don't think enough about that. And also, I think what I've done, and not everyone's going to do this the same way. Obviously, my image is very me. Yeah. But you know, I think what I've done is that I've taken these ideas and kind of expanded on them visually as well, you know, and kind of put my own signature on them. But I think that, yeah, you just have to be a vessel for that message and communicate what you want to communicate. You've
really got a passion for that ability to create imagery. That's something that's an expression of who you are. And
oh, absolutely. That's what I like doing. I mean, if I just decided I'm done talking and I'm bored with being well known,
right,
I would just be a photographer or something. You know, like that's it. I like doing that.
Yeah, I understand.
So I mean that's something that I bring to the table. But and I try to help other guys who maybe aren't as good with that. You know, you'll see some guy and he's like, he has good ideas, but he's speaking to the camera like this, and his face is like all like distorted, and he has no lighting, and he doesn't see anything, and whatever. And I'm like, well, everyone thinks you're crazy because you're talking like this. You know, like that. Like you can, there are things that you can look at and see, wait, hey, it'd be a little bit better. You'd come across better if you changed a few things.
Man, I've been told that many times, and I'm just too stupid to listen. But that's just the way it is, you know.
Yeah.
There is so a lot of what you're talking about, I think it comes from a desire for men to do better, for people to step up. And I think the real success of any of us that are doing this kind of stuff, that are out there throwing our necks out there, you know, taking the slings and arrows, mm-hmm. I think there is a heartfelt desire for people to do better.
Yeah.
So if you've got any kind of, what would you tell someone that's wanting to jump out on a path like ours, that's wanting to get out there in front of everybody, stand up with their own 2 feet and say something gloriously stupid for the first time, you know, because that's what I did. Sure. I'm just going to be honest about it. What would you tell them? What kind of advice would you give them right off the bat to emulate your success?
I would say that there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and you should put the thought in terms of, you know, a lot of people just want to run their mouths, and that's, you know, some people are just good at that. That's not what I do. I put a lot of thought when I write. Like we said, we were talking about earlier, I have to make everything that I've ever said make sense with everything else. And so I'll write a sentence. My writing process is terrible. I'll sit and write, and then I'll rewrite it, and then I'll rewrite it and rewrite it. And this is the best way to say that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And so I think that people don't think about how much time goes into that. And I do think that you need to spend the time and do the work, and not just run your mouth. You know, and there's varying levels of that. I mean, I know guys who are technically, they know so much technical stuff, But they could also benefit from a little bit of, like we were talking about, marketing and so forth. How are you presenting yourself? And you can always do better. And I think that actually the desire to do better at that is what drives you to be good at it. I mean, like I said, I'm going to speak in Orlando, and I'm speaking with guys who are YouTube personalities, and they can get up and talk for 3 hours if they want to, and they'll just keep going, and that's their personality because they're extroverts and so forth. But how do you give a professional presentation? And
Right.
you have to go do the research, like how do other people do this, and how can I adapt it? And I've done that even with ritual, like the rituals that we do out at Wolfgang. How does everyone always done ritual? How do people create an experience that's powerful for other people? And I think that you have to look how everyone else does it, and then put your own signature on it. And because there is a process that you have to go through, and there are things that work and things that don't. And then a lot of it is what works for you as well. But you have to do all that work and look at how all these other people, how do they present? How do they speak to people? Maybe your speaking voice. I mean, I would love to pull more likes and ums out of my speech. I'm always working to improve things.
Yes. That you're talking about ritual. You're absolutely right. Well, I remember when I went through the AFA Gothi program, you have to lead a ritual. So we're in the mother of all moots in Southern California, I think it was Napa Valley.
Yeah.
There's 150 people standing in this circle waiting on me to give to. So many people have this lifestyle of expectant phenomenon to justify their faith. They're
Right.
waiting to see something to justify this radical departure from the norm. And when you step out in the middle of that, you become the focal point for that. I don't think people realize when you get out there to lead that ritual, there's a real need to put on a show as much as there is to create that experience in the individual. Hey, I've made the right decision. Because I think when it all boils down, we've got to convince these people, yes, you've made the right decision. It's going to be okay. You're right where you belong. That's, I think, one of the key things with ritual for me anyway. I mean, could be wrong, but I've done some pretty good ones.
Yeah. You have a responsibility, and I've heard people say that that's not true, and they're wrong. But you have a responsibility. I mean, I can't make someone have an experience that they don't want to have. Obviously, people who are coming out to my events or probably your events or whatever, they want to have an experience. They want to have a powerful experience, and so, I mean, that's great to work with because you're not working from nothing. Because
Right.
they want to go there in their heads, but it is absolutely your responsibility. And I feel that when I have 30 guys out there, I just did the best ritual I've ever done a couple of weeks ago. I mean, and I'm out of my land, I'm in my building, and there's dudes out there already screaming. And I'm like, walking out, I'm like, I'm like, all right, well, let's rock and roll. But
No quiet bloats, man. No quiet bloats.
Yeah. You have to. You're responsible for conducting that and moving it forward and saying something that makes sense. And I've heard there are people who think that doesn't matter, that it's just about the feeling or whatever. And man, I work really hard to make sure that what I'm saying is consistent with my message, it's consistent with the experiences that I want to have, and that it's consistent with positive development for the people that are there. And so I think about all of that going into it. And so, when people think that you're just getting up and doing a thing, I think if you are, then you're doing it wrong, because you're the leader, you're the spiritual leader at that moment. And it is your responsibility, absolutely, to connect with these people and channel that thing, that eternal thing. That's what you do. And that's what I started out as a writer, and I've been writing books for a while and so forth. But I started doing rituals with another group, and that's what I feel like I'm meant to do that. I like doing that. And so that's for me. That's filling that role and being that channel for that moment is really fulfilling.
It is gratifying.
It's exhausting. I don't really want to talk to anybody after I'm done with it, but it is very powerful experience for me, and it's different for me than it is for them. you know,
It
because
is.
I have to be on, and I have to be thinking, and I have to be working. And you know, anyone who tells you that they're not is bullshitting you. You know, you have to be there, and you know, you can't just space out. So I
People
think
will go fishing. They'll start daydreaming about how their feet hurt or their knees hurt or I'm tired of standing here or it's hot. I mean, there's people minds drift. You got to keep it
yeah,
centered.
yeah, and I mean, I'm when I'm doing that, I'm 100% like, this is it's like I said, let's rock and roll. This is what we're doing right now, and this is it. You know, like that's I love doing that thing, and so like I'm just trying to find ways to keep doing it.
Right, right. So I don't have much more to ask, and we're getting pretty close. But I do want to touch on the political side of things.
Okay.
You live up in the Pacific Northwest, right? And there's a
Yep.
lot of activity up there. Portland, there's a lot of negative energy coming from these crowds. All that energy being expressed.
Yes.
It's got to be tempting to get involved in
No, not at all.
Okay, fair enough, man.
No, I did my time. I made
Right.
the rounds. You know, America sucks right now in the way that, you know, in the America I grew up in, you used to be able to like, hey, that guy's got an interesting idea. I don't agree with him about everything, but I can still hang out with him and hear what he has to say.
Right? Yeah, you
And
could.
that's gone away, and it's sad because, you know, yeah, you used to be able to hang out with people who have completely different ideas and talk to them and get something out of what they're saying. And you didn't have to hate them, and you didn't have to be, you know, have people follow you around because you talked to that person once, which means you believe everything that they've ever said. And that's bullshit. You know, like I've hung out with some pretty controversial people in my life. In fact, I'm pretty good at that.
Right.
Pretty good at finding controversial people to hang out with, and because they're interesting. You know, they're passionate. They're into what they're doing at the moment, and so I'm getting a lot out of that. And but that doesn't mean that, you know, that's why I'm a writer. I'm going to write what I actually mean.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to, you know, I'm not that guy that I hung out with. I'm me. And so like I've been involved in all that, and there's, I think with all the protests and stuff like that, I mean, I think that so much of that, you know, you have communists and fascists. I mean, that's not even real. That's not, I mean, that's 20th century LARPing. I mean, those people are not, they're not, communism and fascism are not two powerful forces in the universe right now. They're not what's changing the world. I mean, there's billion dollar corporations moving things. There's all kinds of different factors that are controlling society. It's not fascism versus communism. That's just like
excellent point.
You know, that's a game that people are playing because they think it's fun and it makes them feel important. I don't think that, you know, if they were really a threat, they wouldn't shoot them with rubber bullets. You know, like
Right. No shit.
You know, I mean, they're just being allowed to act out. You know, like they're like kids.
Do you think we got kind of a false sense of security now that Trump's in office? Because I saw everything after Augustus kind of laid down and Brian James and him split, and there was all of this kind of slowed down. It doesn't seem like there's the same impetus we used to have to be so loud about what we were thinking.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. There's corporate censorship, which again, that's what's real now. I mean, it's not like the government's stopping us from saying things. They don't have to because Facebook's going to. You know, Facebook will take care of that for them. You know, they don't have to. The government doesn't have to control us in the way that corporations will, because corporations serve the dollar. And so, like, if they're going to lose dollars by letting you say things, then they're going to not let you say it. And that's how it works. And as far as Trump, I mean, I wrote about that before he was elected because all these guys thought it was going to be the best thing that ever happened in the whole history of the universe. And, you know, I think Trump's funny, and I respect him as a man because, man, he is playing the game.
He is that, man.
He knows what he's doing. But at the same time, I mean, I don't really think that, you know, really that – I was always like, well, not that much is actually going to change. Just because he's president. I mean, there are little waves of things that change, but it's not like big changes that he's bringing about. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think I actually at the time wanted Hillary to win because I thought that was the moment that I'm like, everyone hates her so much that this might be the moment where they actually like say, this is not the America I want to be in anymore. And then they make a big move.
Right.
And I think that moment has passed. I don't think that they're going to do that. And I think maybe Trump might win again just because they're floating people who like are clearly not going to win, you know? And
Right.
so I think he might win again, but then whatever happens, you know, in another 4 years is going to be really the opposite of that. So I don't have a lot of big hope for it. I'm not super involved in that kind of scene. And I think that all happens without our input anyway. So
Pretty
I
much
try to
does.
think about what I control, control in my life. And that's what I tell men all the time. Focus on things that, are in your sphere of influence. And the president is clearly not in my sphere of influence. So, he doesn't listen to me, weirdly enough.
Yeah, he's a lot like us. He's going to do exactly what he wants to do.
That's right.
I was listening to Rush Limbaugh before that after he got elected, and he said there was one pollster that got the election right, and he asked a question. He said, "Who do you think your neighbor's going to vote for to win the presidency?" And they would say, "Well, my neighbor's going to vote for Trump."
Right.
And he got the election results right. I wonder if that speaks about an aspect of courage, that very powerful. You get flogged online. You go online with something controversial, there's going to be a dozen people try to shout you down. Well, I don't know if I'm safe to express that, but my neighbor might vote for Trump. That's an interesting idea of this lack of a backbone in America. I think when you ask a question like that to get the right answer. I saw you come out about the Bill of Rights the other day.
Right.
I saw you come out. I think that's a crucial thing. I know there's another organization that's really supporting. As a matter of fact, they came and pulled security for me at a speech I gave in Independence in Blue Springs, Missouri, outside Kansas City. Okay. Josh Long and them came and actually pulled security for me. I was real happy they did, but they're of the same mindset. It's the Bill of Rights is about all we have.
That's all we have left. I mean, it's what keeps us becoming the UK. Right. I mean, most, I'd say my paternal line comes through the UK, and I have no desire to even go there. I don't even know if they let me in. It's such a police state, it is truly Orwellian. And I don't think a lot of Americans realize that because, well, how would you know? Because their media is controlled. It's really sad. And I don't understand people who want other people's opinions silenced because the consequences of that are so high. And whatever else America is and people want it to be or whatever, as soon as those go away, you can't talk about it anymore. The decision's going to be made for you. And so no other debates matter as long as those things are in question. As long as we're at a point where censorship is becoming cool. And that's, I mean, even the most liberal librarian, school teacher that you grew up with, that I grew up with, it was always like book burning is wrong. That was the way that America was. No, book burning is wrong. Censorship is wrong. Obviously that you don't want to have obscenity and you don't want to have kids looking at messed up stuff that they're not ready to see.
Right.
But at the same time, you have, for adults, censorship is wrong. Book burning is wrong. And that was the way even liberals, there was actually, a liberal idea. And now the other side is very all about controlling each other's speech and controlling what people say. And it's very, it's very troubling.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
What you're talking about 20 years ago, when I was a child in the 70s and the early 80s, if my father had been pagan,
yeah,
DHS, Oklahoma Department of Health and Human Services, would have been on our doorstep investigating, are you taking care of this child? Because that church down there says, no, now that's all changed.
Yeah, no.
We really have had a radical shift in our mindset, what we're allowing to happen, this flowering, if you will, of pagan, heathen ideologies. And all of a sudden, we are becoming this conservative voice of reason, I think, with regards to the Bill of Rights. Think about how dramatic that change is. What do you think about that? I mean, that's because it's all of a sudden there's a large responsibility on our shoulders. Like we were talking about earlier, we are that example. How do we carry up under that burden?
Yeah, I mean, not everything. Again, like all the world is bad, everything is terrible. A lot of things have changed that are kind of cool.
Right.
A lot of, in many ways, we are more free than maybe we were 50 years ago, or more socially free, or whatever. But then, new controls have arrived, and
Yeah.
I think that not everything that's been changed. I mean, things you could wear out in public, 50 years ago. I mean, I don't think it's bad that people are allowed to wear different things and express themselves. It's also my right to think that they look stupid and make fun of them.
Right.
And people, I'm sure people look at me and think I'm stupid and make fun of me, and
I mean, it's ultra talks. I mean,
that's the America way. Like, we're grown men, like we're allowed to, you should be able to say what you want, but there are also consequences. Do what you want, but
yeah.
people are going to judge you, and that's, people want to be free from judgment now. They want to be free from anyone saying that they don't like what they do. They want affirmation, like guaranteed affirmation. I mean, that, like, you see a lot of that. There's that. I don't know, a lot of the feminists and all these things, like, whether you're fat, you're always beautiful, no matter, no one's allowed to say that you maybe have a health problem.
Right.
There's all this guaranteed affirmation in society that people are looking for. Like, everybody wants to be a winner even when they're not, and all that. And I don't think we get guaranteed to be affirmed, but I think it is nice that we can go out and kind of do what we want, and then find our audience of the people who do like what we have to say, and do like the way we're putting out there. I mean, like, what I do is not for everybody.
Right.
And I don't want it to be. I don't want to control people.
I got you there.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson speaks about equality of outcome as being an issue. And I think that guaranteed of non-judgment, I think, is another aspect of that.
Absolutely.
People anyway. Before we close out, you have a website, you have a new book, you're speaking where next weekend?
No, in October.
In October, okay.
In October, I'm speaking at the 21 convention.
Okay.
And you can read more about that on my website at jack-donovan.com. And as far as I am working on a book this winter, probably, that's going to be my big project. After I get all the speaking stuff done and so forth, I want to hunker down and write a book that's more related to Odin and Thor and Frey, and kind of these concepts, kind of set up a platform for what I've been talking about in rituals and so forth. So I'm looking forward to working on that and just kind of going into a space to work on that. But where people can find me normally is on Instagram. I think that's where I put out the most consistent content.
Okay.
At Start the World is my Instagram handle.
That's yours? Okay. Okay.
Start the World. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight. Thank you for the awesome conversation. And we're going to get this on YouTube, and we'll probably stir the pot because you and I are talking, and people aren't going to like it.
Oh yeah. It'll be, yeah. The YouTube comments will be fantastic. Let's just preemptively say that they suck.
Okay, man. All right, man. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
All right. The